It's official. The Mormon Church is rich AF. And this is not something that you should feel happy about. You should be terrified. I'll tell you why in just a minute. First, let me play my little intro video so you know who I am. I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take 2. Just a little bit about me to start this video. I used to be Mormon, now I'm not. That's really all you need to know about me in this particular video. And when I was Mormon, I had no idea that my church was wealthy. In fact, I heard so many stories about the oppression of the early pioneer Mormons and the struggles that the church went through that I guess in my head, I really felt like the church was just constantly fighting to stay one step ahead. Maybe I was projecting my own childhood onto the church, but I never pictured them as wealthy. I pictured the Catholic Church as being wealthy. I guess I pictured Islam being wealthy because of all the oil money in the Middle East, but I had no freaking idea that the Mormon Church was wealthy. One of the reasons why I didn't think they had any money was that we as members of the church did everything for free. Nobody gets paid in the Mormon Church except for the prophet and the top apostles and people who are actually employed by the church. But everything that happens within the church organization is done utterly for free. Those missionaries, they pay to go out there on a mission. I sent my son out on a mission when he was 18. We paid for him. The church doesn't pay you to be a missionary, and they don't pay for your mission. That's mom and dad's job and a couple of ward members if you have some generous friends. The bishop works for free. All of his counselors, absolutely free. Most of the general authorities are free. The patriarch is free. I was a Relief Society presidency member in 3 different Relief Society presidencies, and it was a part-time job. It was at least 20 hours a week of preparation and visiting the sisters and all the different things that we did. And honestly, I was on call 7 days a week. And then a huge Sunday where I ran the Relief Society and had meetings as early as 6 o'clock in the morning with the bishopric and planning meetings before church, visiting sisters after church. It was a huge job. I also served as young women's president, a primary president, and served in callings throughout my whole entire life. Now, these are called callings because you don't ask to do them. It's not like some churches where you go and they're like, if you're convicted to volunteer, then please do. No. In Mormonism, the bishop tells you what he wants you to do. And all of that is free, absolutely, utterly, completely free. I worked as a cub committee chair. I worked as a little den mom. I did all kinds of things. They were absolutely free. The church didn't pay me anything. So I just always had this assumption that the church didn't have any money, that we really had to do our best to pinch our pennies as a religious institution so that we could keep from going under. There was a funny little change that happened in my childhood that actually made me worry about our church's financial health. When we used to have janitorial staff that came in and cleaned the church buildings, like paid people that were professionals, and they came in and did all the vacuuming and scrubbing out the toilets. And then we had this huge announcement that because of budgetary concerns, this was now on the shoulders of the members. So on top of everything else I did, my family, me and my husband and my 5 kids, we would go down to our giant church building 1 day a month because he was the elders quorum president and I was always in presidency. So we just rotatingly signed up to do this, and we would clean the church buildings top to bottom. We would wash the chalkboards, we would scrub the toilets, we would vacuum everything, do all the dusting. We cleaned our church buildings for free. That's still ongoing right now. The Mormon Church doesn't pay anybody for anything. They don't have to because they have a bunch of people that belong to the church who are just happy to work for free for the Lord so that they can go to heaven after they die. And it's a great system. And it's funny looking back now on how that image of humility and like borderline poverty that the leaders of the church portrayed was almost like the ultimate grift. Like they are the OG grifters, the Mormon Church itself. Because honestly, like I never questioned a single penny that I paid the church because I knew that they needed it so badly. So I paid my 10% plus a generous fast offering plus extra donations that we didn't need to make because they needed it and I needed the blessings, baby. Exactly how rich is the Mormon Church? Let's dive into this Tribune article together and we shall see. My actual email subject was, how rich is the LDS Church? The LDS Church soon may no longer need tithing to cover its global expenses. In the modern history of its financial empire, the LDS Church hit several major milestones last year. With a gain of $23.5 billion last year. You guys, replay that a couple times. I'm just going to repeat it one time. with a gain of $23.5 billion just last year. According to the Widow's Mite report, the church's investments reached a range of $206 billion in value. Those are up from $157 billion barely 2 years ago. So vast and rapidly growing are those holdings, in fact, that this independent report is likening the faith's future to one of unlimited money. Can you imagine having unlimited money relative to its likely expenditures in coming years? As an endowment, invested reserves are sufficient to fund church programs forever. Forever. Even if donations stopped today completely. By the projections of the Widow's Mite website, the Utah-based faith could be worth $1 trillion sometime after 2040. I've heard that number by other financial people that within 15 years, the Mormon Church will be worth $1 trillion. Trillion with T. Ultimately, the site says there may be no practical built-in limit to the wealth the faith might amass, from investment returns likening its holdings at one point to a rocket attaining escape velocity compared to its earthly obligations. On top of that, $206 billion in current investments, if you add in the value of the church's operating assets, such as its ecclesiastical buildings, welfare farms, the Brigham Young University system, and other immense land holdings around the globe, its total wealth has now reached another milestone at about $293 billion as of last year. They dive into some other assets that the church has and all of these different sources of revenue that they are currently enjoying the fruits of. You can read the article to get into all of those. The size of that commingled wealth also seems to be swelling much faster than the faith's ability to deploy those funds, according to the Widow's Mite. That's even with the flurry of new temples announced or under construction, which the website estimates will cost an average of $30 million apiece to build. One thing that sort of alarms me in this article is the vast amount of land that the Mormon Church is buying up. There are concerns from Australian government leaders about the thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of farmland across Australia that the church is purchasing. They have bought so much farmland in Nebraska that they have driven prices up for real farmers who aren't churches across the state of Nebraska. Also, they own a large majority of the farmland in Florida. The Mormon Church currently owns more of planet Earth than I think anyone who isn't just an actual country. In my opinion, and I could be wrong about this, I'd love to hear what you guys think, we need to start taxing these guys. In the United States, the reason why we don't tax churches in a very simplified nutshell is this. It is assumed that churches will provide benefits to their communities if the government then doesn't have to. If a church is running a food bank and that eliminates the need for food stamps or supplements the need for food stamps, then the government's saving money. So they created that tax-free umbrella. And I think that should stop. I think that all churches should be taxed because they are businesses, period. End of story. Now, let me tell you why it's absolutely terrifying that the Mormon Church has amassed this amount of wealth. Because the Mormon Church is built on this foundational scripture, the Book of Mormon. And what the Book of Mormon says is very specifically terrifying. This is a work of holy war and of opposition to government. It is a cult that is intended to act as a parasitic organization within the United States of America. Joseph Smith was born at a really interesting time in America where we were industrializing and we had advancements in transportation with steam engines and railroads. And we had advancements in communication with printing presses, with the telegraph. And now we have social media and all these other things that advanced the Mormon cult in ways that no other religious institution had. The Mormon Church has, in fact, grown faster by some accounts than early Christianity simply because of that, because of transportation and communication. Arguably, one of the reasons also why the Mormon Church spread so rapidly was just the increase in population. There weren't as many people alive in 0 BC, so we had a denser population, we had a growing population, and the Mormon Church really came into its heyday with the baby boom, when our population here exploded, exponentially increasing the number of Mormons on the planet. Back to the Book of Mormon. This book talks about the United States being God's kingdom. Joseph Smith taught that everything happened here on this land, literally on the American continent, he revealed that the Garden of Eden had been in a place that he called Adam on Diamond outside of Jackson County, Missouri. Like literally, God made the whole entire earth, and then he floated down to America with his spiritual son, Jesus, and they put Adam right there in Missouri. That is the belief of the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church teaches that after Jesus was killed in Jerusalem and the Christian theological writings of the Bible, that he then went up to heaven, saw over there, did what he was supposed to do, and then he floated down to the American continent. There's a whole entire book in the Book of Mormon that talks about Jesus spending 40 days here in the American continent with what Joseph Smith taught was the predecessors to our American Indian. That's why it's called the Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. This isn't just to support the Bible. The Book of Mormon teaches that Jesus came to the Americas because this is his promised land. Nephi, chapter 11. The Father testifies of his beloved Son. Christ appears and proclaims his atonement. Blah, blah, blah. Now it came to pass that there were a great multitude gathered together of the people of Nephi round about the temple, which was in the land of Bountiful, which is all supposed to be right here in America. And they were marveling and wondering one with another, and were showing one to another the great and marvelous change that had taken place. And they were also conversing about this Jesus Christ, of whom the sign had been given concerning his death. Verse 8 here. And it came to pass, as they understood, they cast their eyes up again towards heaven, and behold, they saw a man descending out of heaven, and he was clothed in a white robe. He came down and stood in the midst of them, and the eyes of the whole multitude were turned upon him. And they durst not open their mouths, even one with another, and wist not what it meaneth, for they thought it was an angel that had appeared unto them. It wasn't an angel, though. Right here, behold, I am Jesus Christ, whom the prophets testified should come into the world. The Book of Mormon teaches that Jesus comes to America. Why? Because America is a special place. So the Book of Mormon also teaches that God led Christopher Columbus is in the Book of Mormon, to America so that there could be freedom of religion, and so that everything that God had established in the Garden of Eden could then be restored right here in America. It also teaches that Joseph Smith, the founder of Mormonism, his name is in the Book of Mormon here. It talks about Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon. This Book of Mormon is supposed to be thousands of years old, but Joseph is named by name, Joseph. My prophet Joseph, who should restore the new and everlasting gospel. Anyway, according to this storyline, Joseph Smith is going to be born, and he's going to restore the Mormon Church. And that is when the great battle begins to happen. That ushers in the final seal of Revelation. And we're in a period that the Mormons call the hastening, where God is hastening his work towards the great and final battle of Armageddon, in which America is going to be given back to the Mormons. Jerusalem is going to be like one little hub over there in Israel, but the new Jerusalem is going to be, guess where? Where the Garden of Eden used to be, in Jackson County, Missouri. And that new Jerusalem is where the Mormon Church is going to rule not just America, but the entire world. You guys, it's like Mein Kampf, where it's not even hidden. This is in plain sight. I learned this stuff from the time I was like 3 and 4 years old. I took intensive seminary classes as a high school student, where we dove deep into what God promised was going to happen in the latter days, and how that American government and the entire government in the world was going to be turned over to the prophet, to Jesus Christ himself, to be ruled and reigned from Jackson County, Missouri. Also, I've noticed the fact that in this Book of Mormon, it's just constant warfare, constant murder. And this murder is really significant because it's holy war. Also, like, you might recognize the word jihad. Something that I really grappled with as a Mormon girl growing up. Like, the 10 Commandments say not to murder people, but there are times when that's actually okay, according to my Mormon doctrine. In the very first couple books of the Book of Mormon, there's a story of Nephi who needs to take some records from his uncle. So God tells him through the Spirit, it's better that one man should perish than a nation dwindle in unbelief. So take his sword, his head off. And that is when I learned when it's okay to murder people. As I think I was like 7 or 8 years old when I read that story for the first time. And here's what I got out of that. Like, my overarching message was, it's okay when the Holy Ghost tells me and I have that confirmation from the Spirit that this is what Heavenly Father wants me to do. If I have that confirmation, then I have to act. I'm commanded to act. I then also took oaths about that in the temple, that I would give everything, even my own life, if it be necessary, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was absolutely radicalized, weaponized, and turned into a soldier for Mormonism within the Mormon temple. And I took that stuff very seriously. Is it any coincidence that Idaho and Utah are now deeper south than the actual South? That there are more preppers, that there are more people with weapons, that there are more people who express that they are willing to fight against other humans to preserve their religion than anywhere else? No, that's foundationally Mormon. All of these people are Mormon. Idaho has so many of these weaponized Mormons who are like in the middle of this hastening, making shit happen up there. And you should all be terrified. If you're not, you have your head under a rock. To me, it's absolutely terrifying that the Mormon church has that much money. They can do whatever they want. They have more surplus than the American government. A conversation that we have a lot in my ex-Mormon spaces is why the church is building so many temples when the membership is in decline. Those temples are not temples. Those temples are fortresses. That's what the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenant both say, that the battle, the great and final battles, will be fought from the Mount of the Lord. The Mount of the Lord is Mormon slang for the temple. You can Google that. That's something that I learned my entire life within Mormonism. It is, come to the Mount of the Lord is when you're going to the temple. The Mount of the Lord is where the Mormon church will fight their battles from. These Mormon temples are fortresses with walls that are like 10 feet thick, made out of reinforced, bulletproof, earthquake-proof, tsunami-proof concrete and metal, clad in gold, clad in what's that called? Marble, limestone. The church has spent the past several years digging this vast pit around their main hub, the Salt Lake City temple, digging up everything and completely seismically reinforcing it, adding new secret tunnels. There's all kinds of infrastructure underneath the surface of Temple Square in Salt Lake City that go from all of the leadership buildings into the temple and everywhere around. You know what's funny? Even as I do this video, I have this overwhelming feeling of just saying, if I disappear, something happens to me, it's because I've said too much. And that is the true, genuine, authentic feeling that I have whenever I do these videos, that I spent my whole entire life within the Mormon church knowing that at some point we had been prepared through reading the Book of Mormon to go out and fight the battles against the non-Mormon Gentiles here in America so that we could take back the country for Jesus Christ. And I knew that I would do that at all costs. It's terrifying. By the way, I highly recommend everybody get yourselves a copy of the Book of Mormon and read it so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. And I'd love to hear from you after you read the Book of Mormon, what you think about this and what's going on. My final thought is just my personal experience of being scammed by the Mormon church in the name of tithing. I know I told the story in a couple of videos, but while I was going through my ovarian tumor, which would almost take my life, I literally had a near-death experience, was septic, and was expected not to make it. While I was going through all of that and we were experiencing medical bankruptcy and our lives were burning to the ground, because the mom of these 5 kids didn't have the ability to take care of 5 kids and the husband was stepping in, we didn't have enough support to get through that time. Instead of giving us money, instead of us paying us rent, instead of bringing us food and things like that, the Mormon church was still taking our 10% tithing. And when I was at my sickest and was completely bedbound and couldn't leave the house, I asked my bishop to come over and renew my temple recommend, because without that little piece of paper, you can't get into the Mormon temple. The bishop and the stake president both came over so that they could give me the interview, ask me all the questions, renew my recommend. And one of the questions that they asked me was about tithing. And they said, are you guys full tithe payers right now? And I knew that we were probably a little bit behind. I asked Jake, are we full tithe payers? And he said, no, we're a little bit behind. So he got out his checkbook, wrote out a check, gave to the bishop. During a time when his wife was dying and he was barely able to even just keep up with his 5 kids and his horrible life, during a time when I thought that I wouldn't be here to raise those children, we handed a check to our Mormon bishop that he came over to renew my temple recommend. And I did that because I felt like paying my tithing would protect me spiritually so that I could go to heaven, because the Mormon church always dangles this carrot that like, you'll never get to the celestial kingdom. You're almost there. And you have to run your ass off just to ever feel like you're good enough or deserving enough. And then you never, ever feel like you do. We did it because we wanted the celestial blessings, because the Mormon church always has that carrot that they're dangling in front of you. And I wanted to make sure that I was square with God so that I could be with my family again in case he took me in my 30s. And that carrots always dangling and you never quite get there. You're always running your ass off, but you never feel like you're worthy of the celestial kingdom as a member of the Mormon church. And there was always this feeling when I was paying my tithing that there was like widows in Africa or people with Lou Gehrig's disease who really needed that money more than I did, orphans, people with AIDS, things like that. They needed that money more than I did. I had zero idea when I was paying Mormon tithing that they were buying up stock in Tesla and hoarding land in Arizona. I want to wrap this up with exactly what the Mormon tithing commitment looks like, because I do get a lot of questions about this. Tithing in Mormonism is 10%. 10% of your income goes to the church, and we were taught that that was on our gross income. So if our income for this year was X amount, it didn't matter what our taxes said. We paid on X amount. If we had a $250,000 year, we paid $25,000 in tithing. During my illness, when our income was greatly reduced, if we had an $80,000 year, then we would pay $8,000 in tithing. My ex-husband estimated that in the 24 years that we were married, that we paid between $200,000 and $300,000 in tithing. I know that that's kind of a broad estimate. We don't have all of our records. That tithing is paid in addition to fast offerings and other offerings. So I know that like a lot of Christian churches, when you go to church, there's like an offering period where you can scan the QR code or you can go to the little box or put some money in the tray. I know that Kevin and I had a conversation one time about how much offerings he typically paid. And it was like a little bit, like if they paid like $100 a month, then that was a lot. We were paying $25,000 a year, $10,000 a year. We were sometimes paying more in tithing than what our mortgage payment was. Our tithing was the single biggest expense that we had. And again, paid on our gross. So after taxes, our paycheck wasn't always that big. Tithing was huge. With our tithes and fast offerings and other donations that we made, paying for 2 missionaries to go out, which was about $10,000 a piece, and then like Defensive Scouting, which was thousands of dollars a year. We also donated to the church humanitarian fund. If there were ever disasters, we sent a missionary out ourselves. And then serving in our callings, we also had things that we did for free that we didn't get reimbursed for because, again, the church doesn't pay for anything. So if I was in Relief Society presidency, our budget for the Christmas party might be $200 and it might cost $1,000 to actually feed the whole entire ward. So that was always like money that we were dipping into our own pockets. We gave more to the church than we gave to ourselves. And I know that there have been Mormon content creators like Jacob Hansen who just have an inability to tell the truth, who have made public statements recently that tithing is not a requirement. It absolutely is. It is a commandment. You must pay your tithing to even get that little recommend to go into the Mormon temple. And if you don't go to the temple and get sealed to your husband, then you don't get eternal life and you don't get to be with your eternal family. And that is what Mormonism is all about. So it is taught that if you don't pay your tithing, you don't get any of the benefits of the Mormon church, either now in this life or in eternity. I deeply believed as a lifelong member of the church that if I skipped my tithing ever, I wouldn't go to heaven. I wouldn't live with God. I wouldn't be in the celestial kingdom. And it's really sad to me now looking back on like my 3-year-old self in my youth ministry, which is called Primary, when they had this little box on fast Sundays and I had to put fast offerings in there and they started teaching us if somebody gives you 10 pennies, you give 1. I grew up in abject poverty. I needed all 10 pennies. I didn't have one to give to the church. There was a time when I started babysitting and I might only get like $5 for babysitting and I'd give 50 cents to the church. Again, abject poverty, we never had enough. There were times when my family couldn't pay for electricity, when we didn't have enough food to eat. I was hungry my whole entire life. My childhood was a nightmare, and I was paying that tithing to the church. And it's a good thing I did, because if me and all of my friends and family and other members of the ward that lived in my community and around the world hadn't done so, the church could have never become a trillion-dollar organization, which is absolutely ridiculous. You guys, this is one of the reasons why I boycott Mormon businesses just out of hand. I will never buy one of those damn chocolate scones or croissants or whatever they are from Ballerina Farm, because 10% of everything that Hannah and Daniel make is going to this Mormon organization. 10% of any crumble cookie, 10% of swig, 10% of all of the money that you put into all of these Mormon businesses is making these guys rich. Nobody should be this powerful. Nobody should have this much money. If you knew the things about the Mormon doctrine that I know, you would not put a penny into the Mormon pipeline. Anyway, hope I've given you guys something to think about. I'll be hanging out in the comments to answer questions, and I love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Bye.